The Pontchartrain Park Pioneers Oral History Project is presented by the Center for African and African American Studies at Southern University at New Orleans and the following sponsors: the National Park Service, the United States Department of the Interior through the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the Division of Historic Preservation. My name is Dr. Clyde Robertson. I'm the director of the Center for African and African American Studies at Southern University at New Orleans. I'm also the director, co-researcher, and co-interviewer for the Pontchartrain Park Pioneers Oral History Project. This oral history project examines the lives and experiences of the original homeowners and residents of Pontchartrain Park. The Pontchartrain Park Pioneers Oral History Project's team consists of Connie Abdul Salam, Assistant Professor of History at Southern University at New Orleans; Dr. Michael Mahan, Director of Satellite Communications at Southern University at New Orleans; and Ms. Frances Helena, Senior Psychology Major at Southern University at New Orleans. Today's interview is taking place at the Millie Charles School of Social Work building. Today's date is June 27th, 2019, and the time is 3:47 p.m. Please tell me your name.
My full name is Velma Lee Wilson Slack.
And what year were you born? If you care to share that with us.
I was born April the 28th, 1931.
Where were you born?
I was born in Franklinton, Louisiana.
What made you move to New Orleans?
After I graduated from high school, I came to New Orleans to attend Dillard University.
And what years were those?
Do you know I don't remember?
Okay. Did you meet your husband at Dillard?
No, I met my husband in Franklinton. We are Pentecostal, and he played an electric guitar at church. So he came out there for a revival meeting, and I met him then, 2 years before I finished high school. And we stayed in touch until I graduated from high school. And when I came here, I didn't live on Dillard's campus. I lived with relatives, Reverend Julius Burrell, and went to school. And
was your husband from Franklinton? You said you met him while you were in Franklinton.
No, my husband was born in New Orleans.
And he visited Franklinton while playing the guitar in church.
Yes.
Was he or you in the military?
No.
And so you got married while you were attending Dillard or after you had graduated?
I was still attending Dillard.
And you all were married?
Yes.
Where did you live when you were married? When you became married, where did you live?
I was living with a relative, a Reverend Burrell,
Yes.
in the St. Bernard Project in New Orleans.
And how long did you and your husband remain in that residence?
After we married?
After you were married, yes.
Oh, we didn't live there after we married. We lived at 1900 New Orleans Street. His parents owned a double house there, and we lived half house.
What years were those, if you could remember?
I married in 1951. You know, I graduated from from high school in 1948, and I married in 1951.
And you lived on New Orleans Street until you moved into Pontchartrain Park.
No, we lived there next door to his parents for about 5 years, and we had children, so we got a larger place at 4141 Gibson Street.
And what part of the city is Gibson Street?
That was one block on the other side of the St. Bernard Project.
What year did you move into Pontchartrain Park?
In 1963.
How did you hear about Pontchartrain Park?
I don't even know how I heard about it, but someone told my husband there was a house for sale in the 4200 block of Mithra Street. And he's challenged now, but he was a longshoreman and he was up and he took care of business and stuff. So he went and looked into buying the house. So we moved when we bought the house, moved from Gibson Street to Pontchartrain Park.
In 1963.
63.
How old were you then?
Let's see, I must have been, okay. I must have been about 32 years old.
Can you describe the process of purchasing your home? For example, what kind of paperwork? Did you have an interview with a realtor? How did you go about purchasing your home?
My husband took care of all of that, but I paid the house notes after, $140 a month.
How much was your home? Do you remember?
It was in the teens, and I don't have the paperwork because after Katrina, all of that was lost.
So at the time that you purchased your home, your husband was a longshoreman, and you were a student were you a student at Dillard?
No, I went to Dillard in the evenings after that, and finally finished at Southern.
In Baton Rouge or
Here.
New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
Southern University at New Orleans. What was your degree in?
In secretary science or something.
What year did you finish from SUNO?
Not right away because I had children and I went to evening schools before I finished. I had children and I didn't even march with my graduating class. I just got my degree.
So at the time you purchased your home, you were a college student.
Yeah.
What had you heard about Pontchartrain Park prior to your moving in?
Before we moved here, we knew that it was that Southern was going to be built. Southern was not built, and that there was an area where colored people were buying homes, nice homes, and everything. So we were interested in it.
Were you familiar with the Urban League questionnaire of 1954?
I don't think so.
Were you familiar with the Stern family and their involvement?
I can't remember them.
What about Rosa Keller and her involvement in creating Pontchartrain Park?
I do remember that name, but now I don't remember what she did.
Miss Keller and the Sterns were wealthy white business persons and socialites who helped contribute to the creation of Pontchartrain Park financially and in terms of other areas of support. They worked very closely with the Urban League. You purchased your home in 1963. Do you remember how you financed your home?
My husband was not in the service, but our loan was a VA loan. Now I don't even remember how we got it, but our loan came through the VA department. That one, and I remember it having to be $140 a month.
How long did it take you to pay off your home?
I know about 20 some years, I guess.
When you moved into your home, how many children did you have?
I had 5 children when I moved into my home.
Were there any born while you were in your home?
One born since then.
Can you remember your home's floor plan, your original floor plan? How many bedrooms?
Okay. We had, when you walked in the front door, there was a living room, and just beyond that wall was the kitchen. And then up the hall, there was a bathroom to the right, and I guess 3 bedrooms, because my husband and I had a room at the end of the hall, and the boys were in that corner room there, and the girls were in a room that's now the dining room right there. So it was 3 bedrooms.
Did you choose the bedroom? Did your husband choose the floor plan? Or was that just the floor plan of the home you were able to purchase?
I think that was what it was. And we were so glad to own our own home, because we had been renting with the Slacks, and then to Miss Davis at 4141 Gibson Street. And then when we were buying a home, this was going to be our house. So we weren't too choicy. We were just glad to have it.
What was it like when you first moved into Pontchartrain Park? Were there a lot of families that lived adjacent to you?
Yes, there were no other empty houses. Mr. Dix lived on the corner. You want all those names?
If you could remember.
And there was a Mr. and Mrs. James. This is across the street. Lived next door to him. And the Moultons lived next door to Mr. and Mrs. James. Then the Bradfords lived next door to the Moultons. And I don't remember their name, but Miss Teresa and her husband lived next door to the Bradfords.
Would that be Mr. George?
Mr. George, that's who it was. And, I don't know the names of the people next door to them. Then on our side, on the corner, it was the Collins. And next door to them was Mr. Octave Smith. And next door to them, we lived there. And then the Colemans lived next door to us. And Mr. and Mrs. Turner lived on the corner. So I knew everybody in my block.
Did you know them before you moved, or did you meet them when you
No, I met them after. In fact, once a week, Miss Coleman and them had breakfast, coffee or something if you wanted to come by before you went to work. So we got to know everybody in your block.
The reason I know Teresa, Miss Teresa and Mr. George is because Miss Teresa, if you could remember, was the candy lady.
Yes.
And as I walked from school, on many occasions I would stop over there and purchase some wine candy or some other items. I remember Mr. George and Mr. Teresa quite well.
Right. Uh-huh.
Did those families have children of the same age as your children?
Okay, I know the Moultons had children the same age, the Collins, then Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith had one son, Octave, and he was along with some of my children. The Bradfords had children the same age. The Colemans had children the same age. And Miss Teresa, I don't know if they were her children or nieces or nephews, but she had children that lived there that were along with my children. And they played ball in the street in the afternoon.
Cockhill Elementary School was right down the block.
Yes,
Did your children attend Cockhill?
they did.
Were you satisfied with the education they received there? The teachers?
Yes, and I was happy that they could go there because when we lived on Gibson Street, they were near the St. Bernard Project that had a name that people were bad. So I would drive the children to Phillips School and then go to work. But when I moved to Pontchartrain Park, then I felt comfortable with my children walking to school just a few blocks up the street.
Can you remember the name of the principal and some of the teachers?
I remember Miss Bowie's. I remember the dance teacher. What was her name? Oh, I probably could think of it, but I
Yes.
can't think of it right now.
Yeah, I quite understand. While in
Miss
Pontchartrain,
Terry.
Miss Terry.
Yeah, and I can't think of them now.
While in Pontchartrain Park, do you remember? I know you remember many of your neighbors, but do you remember some of the legendary people who might have lived in Pontchartrain Park at the time?
I knew that the Hydells lived in Pontchartrain Park, not real close to me, but some of them lived on Mither Street on about 2 or 3 blocks on the other side of the school.
That would be Dr. Hydell,
Yes.
one of the younger Hydells. And then Mrs. Moriel, who's a Hydell, lived on Press Drive.
Okay.
Do you remember through your children some of the mythical stories, some of the mythical legends about the park or about some people in the park?
I can't think of any now. I don't know. I know they went to school, they did well, and they played football and whatever. And they were always on the honor roll. We went to PTA meetings. They were held regularly. And whatever the school did, we participated in because the children were happy.
Now, from Cockhill, your children went to what junior high school?
Rivers Frederick is what I remember. They went to, they all went to junior high at Rivers Frederick.
And high schools?
High schools, I know the girls went to 35. And the boys, Kenneth went to up on Carrollton Avenue.
Ben Franklin?
Ben Franklin. Kenneth went to Ben Franklin, but Rosario went to Kennedy because he wanted to play ball.
And college?
College, when Kenneth finished college, he went to Tulane because he wanted to go into law. Rosario went back to Southeastern one semester, and when he came home for Christmas, he told me he wasn't going to school no more. But he has a doctorate now, but he got it on his own because he dropped out and he worked at Dillard. And I really don't know what capacity, but he worked at Dillard. And Valda was a dean of students at Dillard. And Velma Lee got married.
I want to return to your children's childhood. Did they bring home any tales about mythical, legendary figures of the park? For example, the Lady in White. Are you familiar with the Lady in White myth?
They didn't talk to me about it. I don't remember any of those.
Yes. Now, you said at one point one of your neighbors would regularly host breakfasts and coffees at their home. Were there any other forms of recreation that you all had on the block? For example, cookouts, gatherings?
Not really at Pontchartrain Park. Now, when they started working on Southern University, one year they had an Easter egg hunt. And I remember Kenneth won the Easter egg hunt. They had groups, and his age group, and Kenneth was 5 years old at that time too, so it was shortly after we came out here. But other than that, it was football. And I know that when Rosario went to Kennedy School, he didn't like for me to come to his games because he was playing football and he was a receiver. And when he catched the ball, everybody fell on him, and I would holler and talk about it, get up off my child. And he said he was embarrassed, so he didn't like for me to come. And the same thing with Kenneth with basketball when he was at,
Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin. And it was just, he was the only black one on the team. And we would just holler, and they didn't like for me to come to their games.
Now, did your children play ball for Pontchartrain Park, the NORD program at Pontchartrain Park?
I don't think they played in an organized Pontchartrain Park setup.
But they played a great deal on the streets.
Yeah, just in the street. They would all play out there, yeah. And after a while they would come in and make their own Kool-Aid and own hot dogs.
Do you remember other games they might have played in the street in Pontchartrain Park?
That's about it.
Remember
but they would come back to the park and play. There were games back at the park, but I don't think they played any organized games back there.
In the street, do you remember them playing a game called Cool Cans?
Yes. They would stack them up.
That's right. You would stack the cans up, and yes. Your object was to knock your opponent's cans down.
Yeah, I remember them playing that.
Cool Cans was a game that was played all over Pontchartrain Park. nearly every block had a Cool Cans set up in the street. And it's unique because Cool Cans is related to the British game known as cricket.
Oh, okay.
Now, again, let's talk about your children's experiences. Your children did not go to St. Gabriel.
No,
Did you all go to St. Gabriel's church?
no, we were Pentecostal.
Did, to your knowledge, your children have any incidents with the people in Gentilly Woods?
I don't think they did, because if they had to go somewhere, well, by the time they finished college, we bought a car for Rosario and Kenneth because they went to Southeastern, and we bought a car for the girls. And if they had to go somewhere, they very seldom walked out front.
Do you remember the ditch?
Yes, it's right behind Gretchen's house.
That's right. In fact, the fact that you all live so close to the ditch, which means so close to Gentilly Woods, and for many years of your life in the park, Gentilly Woods was all white. Did you have any experiences, positive or negative, with the people in Gentilly Woods?
No, I didn't have any problems because I worked all the time, and then on the weekends, that was church or whatever connected to that. So we never had any problems.
Were you a member of the Pontchartrain Park Booster Club? That's the parents' organization in Pontchartrain Park.
No, I never joined it.
Were you a part of the Pontchartrain Park Association?
Yes, we joined that.
What were some of your experiences there?
Now, I really just joined to support because I didn't have a lot of extra time. I had the children and I worked full time. And then by the weekend, there was shopping to do. In the evening, there was homework to help with. So I didn't have a lot of time. We just paid dues, and I don't remember what it was, but I did it to support because I know they were doing different things to build up. And that was the reason I joined there.
You all moved in 1963. In 1965, Hurricane Betsy hit. Was your property and were your belongings damaged during Betsy?
No, we didn't have any problem with Betsy, but there was water on the corner of Mithra and Press. So it was a lot of water and people couldn't drive through for, I guess, a day or two. But we didn't have any water inside the house. No problems at all.
Did you evacuate or did you stay
No,
put?
we stayed there. But we didn't have any water in there.
Did you have any wind damage to your home?
No, I don't believe. It was the strangest thing. Whatever happened at that time, my husband would fix it. And I didn't pay any attention, I guess.
Were there any homes in your vicinity that were damaged?
Not severely. There might have been some little things, but it wasn't to where anybody had to move out or anything like that. Our area was pretty good.
1965 on into the 1970s. At any time before Hurricane Katrina, did you notice the park changing?
I don't think so.
See any families that you were familiar with in the early 70s moving out? The early 70s through the 70s through the 80s, moving out.
I don't remember anybody moving out unless because everybody was happy in our block. I don't remember anybody moving.
Prior to Hurricane Katrina, there were, in some areas of Pontchartrain Park, there were a number of people to move to larger homes in New Orleans East. So you stayed in the park because you were very satisfied and happy with the surroundings.
Yeah, because my husband added on to our house as much house as we already had. So my house is twice as large as it was when we bought it. It's a 4-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms, 3 full baths. And after the children finished college and whatever, they were offered jobs and they started going away. So we would have never left if Katrina had not come.
So let's actually talk about the Hurricane Katrina experience. For Betsy, you did not evacuate. Did you evacuate for Hurricane Katrina?
Yes, and I was not going to because we had never had any problems, no flooding or nothing. But my daughter lived in Florida, and they had so much stuff on the news about it. So I told her I was not going to evacuate. So she got a room in Jackson, Mississippi, because that was the closest room she could find. And she told me we had to go. And if we didn't go, they were not going to give her money back. So that's the only reason we left, because we had never flooded. So we went to Jackson, Mississippi, and a little hurricane or something came through there while we were there. And I don't remember how many days we were there. But then the news came about the problems in New Orleans. And Velma and her husband lived in Atlanta. So we left the hotel and went to Atlanta to live there. And that's when we found out that all of the flooding in New Orleans, and we stayed there until we tried to get back home.
Was your home on Mithras Street damaged?
Yes. The house itself is pretty sound, but the inside, all the walls, the refrigerator was up in the air, and all the furniture was ruined. All the clothes, all my fur coats, everything was damaged. So we had to get rid of everything in there.
Now, when you remodeled, did you go up or back? In essence, did you add a second floor?
No.
Okay. Because many times the second floors were not damaged, but the entirety of the bottom floors were damaged many times. When did you decide to move back?
Well, at first they told us we couldn't go in Pontchartrain Park. Nobody was allowed in there. And that was kind of word of mouth from friends. And as soon as they told us we could come home, we came. And we couldn't find anywhere to rent. And our neighbors and everybody was just like us, nowhere to stay. So a minister that we knew, Clayton Neal, lived in Mandeville. And he had dated my daughter. And he had a big house in Mandeville. So we went there because we couldn't find anything to rent or anything. And we went there. And then when we came down, we saw all the brown trees and how everything was. And that's how we ended up buying a house in Covington. We would go out looking for a place to live, and they were building areas, 100 houses and all like that. So we could have waited until July the next year for a house. But we kept looking for houses. We would drive through and look. So we found this one house in a North Park subdivision. It was a gated community, and the children saw us as being old, and they wanted us to live in a gated community, so we bought that house. It's the same house, same size as the house I have in New Orleans. 4 bedrooms and 3 full baths, large backyard, about 3 times the size of the one here. And then the front yard.
And what year, the Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, when did you all move to Covington?
We lived with Clayton, I guess. We must have come back here in 2007 or something. And that's when we bought that house, in 2007.
Did you sell or abandon your home in Pontchartrain Park?
No, we Road Home gave us some money, and we were going to fix the house. We had rental property, but they wouldn't give us anything to help with the rental property. And so my husband, he would wake me up at night talking about how everything he ever worked for. I mean, it's just like I never worked. I don't have anything. And he worried about that until he had a stroke. And while he was in the hospital, he had another stroke. So there I was with these 2 rental houses and Pontchartrain Park house and a husband. So I was really challenged, you know. So what we did is I was going to get somebody to fix the rental houses. So we got a church man that we knew, and he didn't do a good job, and so we had to let him go. And then the city condemned those houses because they weren't fixed quick enough. So I was able to sell them, the 2 of them, for less than $50,000. So then I still had the Pontchartrain Park house. And first we had to hire somebody to clean it out. So that was something. They did that. And then my husband had another stroke. And so every time he would have a stroke, I was in the hospital. So the house was sitting there. So it was a long time trying to get the house finished. But we had the house in Covington. It was not completely furnished like I had this house, but we had bought some furniture. So we struggled for a while trying to get things done. So my husband finally had another stroke. Then he had a heart attack. He, while he was being treated for that, they found blood on his brain because he was having seizures, and they said that was from all those aspirins that he had been taking. So we worked with trying to get the blood off of his brain. And in the meantime, he had glaucoma and he went blind. So now he's in a wheelchair and you know, he's challenged. I didn't want to put him in a nursing home, so I just take care of him. So that's what happens with him. But the house in New Orleans is the house is about finished, but it's not like I would want it. And it's not as furnished as I would do it, but we do have the bedrooms, the kitchen is finished, the baths are finished, and we come down sometime and stay. But I, I went through a lot with my husband being challenged.
So when you say we come, it's you and your husband?
Yes. I have a son that lived in Maine. After the hurricane, a guy that he went to college with, Theron, the youngest one, he went to Maine, and so he's home right now, and I wish he would stay, but he just comes to help me some with his dad.
And I don't know if we actually got your husband's name.
David Lee Slack.
So you're rebuilding your home, it's practically finished. Have your neighbors returned to Mithra?
I believe Mr. Dix is there, but I believe his wife is deceased. The James family is gone. They didn't come back after the hurricane. The Motons didn't come back. The LeCages, Mr. LeCage lived across the street too. Well, he's deceased and his wife. So that house is still there. I don't know who lives in it. And Gretchen lives in the Bradford house. The Colemans live next door to me. The Smiths are gone and the Collins people are gone.
In addition to your neighbors, some being back, some having gone, some having passed on, what other differences do you see on the block?
The houses are not the caliber of houses that we had. They're just a little house, and the neighborhood is not kept up like we did. So it's really changed.
And Cockhill, does Cockhill exist?
Cockhill does exist, and I have not been over there since the hurricane because my children are all grown.
Are you aware of or familiar with Wendell Pierce?
I know who he is, but my children know him.
Are you familiar with his post-Hurricane Katrina efforts to provide people with new homes in Pontchartrain Park?
I am aware of that.
Do you think that the new home constructions inspired by Wendell Pierce are actually good additions to Pontchartrain Park?
I don't know which homes he really dealt with.
We know that he was thwarted in his effort to continue to build homes because of red tape and other hindrances. You have maintained your home in Pontchartrain Park. Do you have any regrets, or are you happy that you have maintained your home?
You know, I think that since we have another house, I'm never gonna sell this house. There are some things I want to have done And as my husband gets stabilized, I do have other things done. There, I want an iron gate, and the driveway needs to be replaced. You know, it's kind of cracked in places. I need to have that done. It's a few things I want done, but the children will have to sell it after both of us are gone because I'm never going to sell it.
Is there a reason why?
Because that's the first house we bought, and I don't have to sell it, so I'm not going to. I'm going to try and finish it for them. But we were so excited to have that little house. It's twice the size I told you. But my daughter went back to Phillips School and told her classmates that we were moving to Pontchartrain Park, Louisiana. So we were all excited that we had our own house. And I just, since there's no reason to really get rid of it, I'm going to keep it.
Are you familiar with the efforts being launched by Gretchen Bradford and other current members of the Pontchartrain Park Association?
I know that Gretchen is involved, and I don't know exactly what she does because we really live in Covington most of the time. And one of the reasons we live there is I found that the crime in New Orleans is different than when my children lived here. And so we are more involved in the house in Covington. And I know Gretchen is involved because I know she has the fair. And Theron came home one time when the fair was going on too. So,
are you familiar with the fact that they are attempting to make Pontchartrain Park a historic neighborhood? To add it on to the historic registry?
Is that what this is?
This is actually an oral history that's not associated with that effort, but it is an effort to identify the significance of Pontchartrain Park historically. But what Gretchen's organization is trying to do is is to insert Pontchartrain Park into the National Historic Registry, okay, registering Pontchartrain Park as an official historical neighborhood. Are you supportive of that effort?
I will be.
We know that many of the initial residents of Pontchartrain Park are no longer in the neighborhood or even in the city. Some of them have passed on. However, do you continue your friendship with anyone from those earlier years?
Well, of course, Gretchen is, we were, my children and theirs were always in and out. And the Colemans right next door, they were always in and out. And any other family out here. I don't really know a lot of people that live here. But if you drive through, it's not the same Pontchartrain Park. And also it looks like there's a lot of rental property. And I have gotten letters, people would just write me and want to buy my house. So I don't even answer them because I'm not interested.
So in your opinion, the neighborhood has changed for the worse?
Yes, that's what I think. You live out here, what do you think?
Yes, I agree. What were what are, I should say, some of your most memorable moments in Pontchartrain Park? When you think of the park, what do you remember fondly?
Okay. Well, one thing about Pontchartrain Park is when the children were going to school, they could just get dressed and walk to school. They didn't have to wait for brothers or sisters because I felt like nobody was going to bother them. And I was right because I never had anybody attack my daughters, not my sons. And so I was comfortable with that because when they lived near the St. Bernard Project, I had to take them and they had to stay at school until I got out of school to go get them and whatever. So that was one of the things. And being affiliated with the church, sometime the ladies' auxiliaries would do things at my house, luncheons and meetings that I would have. And I was proud of the way my house looked. And well, I like those kind of things. And we just had a kind of family up there, kind of relationship in the whole block. That's why I know everybody that lived in that block.
Is there anything you miss most about how things used to be?
Um, well, it's all different for me now. All of my children are grown, and nobody really lives in Louisiana. Darren is home now, and he's in an ant's nest to leave, but the children were little and grew up, and you watch them grow and everything. And now I don't even have baby pictures, you know? So everything is so different. Um, my neighbors, so many of them, the husband and the wife are deceased. So that makes it different. And then you have people that seemingly are renters, and you notice the way the property is kept is different. So those are things you look at.
You mentioned that Mr. Slack was a longshoreman. There were several longshoremen in Pontchartrain Park. For example, Mr. Henry, Chink Henry. Did you know any of the other longshoremen in the neighborhood?
No, I didn't know any. He would know them because sometime if he was cutting the grass or something, some of them would drive by and they would talk for hours outside and wouldn't even come in, you know. But he worked as a longshoreman for 35 years. And then I worked with the school system for 32 years. That's how we educated the children and all that stuff.
Is there anything else you'd like to discuss that we didn't touch upon?
No, not really. I don't think the crime is real bad in Pontchartrain Park. It's just bad in New Orleans, I think. And so you're not as comfortable, you know, with living in the city as you would be. And of course, I'm accustomed with living where I'm living, and security drives up and down all the time. And that's what I'm accustomed to now.
Well, Mrs. Slack, on behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you for participating in this oral history about the Pontchartrain Park Pioneers. Your contribution has been immeasurable. Again, thank you very much. This has been a presentation of the Center for African and African American Studies at Southern University at New Orleans and the following sponsors: the National Park Service, the United States Department of the Interior through the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the Division of Historic Preservation.